This is Ross Feingold coming to you from Taipei, Taiwan on the Taiwan Hashtag program hosted by Storm Media. Today, once again, we will be talking about the ongoing protests in Hong Kong and what is the relationship with Taiwan and Taiwan politics and the Taiwan public. Why is this in the news again? Well, the mayor of Taipei City, Wen-je, has got involved in a bit of controversy and criticism from some of the political protest leaders in Hong Kong. Joshua Wong and Agnes Chow will be talking about that momentarily. But first, let's go back to a little history and remind our audience, why are we here? The protests that originally began over the extradition bill that the Hong Kong government proposed. Why did they propose this extradition bill? It was because a young man from Hong Kong murdered his girlfriend on a trip to Taiwan. So there is a strong link to all these events with Taiwan. So Poon Hui Wing was murdered here in Taiwan by her boyfriend. He then returned to Hong Kong, and because there was no extradition agreement between Hong Kong and Taiwan, he cannot be returned to Taiwan. He was eventually charged with money laundering. He's been doing 29 months in prison in Hong Kong, but he will be released later this month, which again will keep the Taiwan aspect of this ongoing conversation in the media. We'll be seeing a lot of that as his release date gets closer. So subsequently, the Hong Kong government proposed this bill. Protests in Hong Kong, concerns about the bill allowing for extradition not just to Taiwan, but to China as well. The public didn't like it. The bill eventually withdrawn. So fast forward to recent events, ongoing protests in Hong Kong, and then on National Day in China, in the People's Republic of China, 70th anniversary, October 1st, additional protests, very violent in Hong Kong. And this resulted in police using force, and there was a police officer who opened fire, used his handgun when he was attacked by protesters. The police, of course, say that it was justified to open fire. Protest public, some of the media say it was not justified. There will certainly be ongoing conversation about that. There will be investigations. There will be calls for investigations of the investigations, because ultimately members of the public in Hong Kong will be unhappy unless the police say that it was wrong for the police officer to open fire. Thankfully, the gunshot wound was not fatal, although it's very serious, and the young man, 18-year-old victim, is still in the hospital. So we'll bring this to Taiwan. The mayor of Taipei City, Wen-je, who was a trauma surgeon in his pre-political career at some of the largest hospitals here in Taipei City, highly regarded as a surgeon. He was asked about these events earlier this week in Hong Kong. In fact, he was specifically asked about the gunshot incident of the young man in Hong Kong. And what did he say? He said, well, this kind of situation was unavoidable, and this is for Beijing to sincerely confront the problem and to deal with it and to find a solution and to stop blaming foreign interference, stop blaming Hong Kong independence forces or people supporting independence in Hong Kong or people supporting independence in Taiwan as the cause of these protests. So America, his message was directed at Beijing. Again, let's look at his entire sentence, which then caused all the controversy. He said this kind of thing was inevitable, and Beijing, right? His message was directed at the Chinese Communist government in Beijing. He said, Beijing, you need to sincerely deal with this, solve the problem, and don't keep blaming people who support independence in Hong Kong or Taiwan or foreign interference. So probably for America, he thought he was saying the right thing. He was directing his criticism not at the protesters. So let's be very clear on that. He was directing his criticism at the Chinese Communist Party government in Beijing. What happened to poor America? Well, within hours of making this statement, Joshua Wong and Agnes Chow, who are some of the political leaders in Hong Kong of the protest movement, they took to social media, where they have very large followings, not just in Hong Kong, but internationally, because they're recognized as leaders and spokespeople for the protest movement. They criticized America. They said the police aimed their gun at this young man. It was basically attempted murder, and you shouldn't be blaming the young man for being shot. But that is not what America said. So this was all over the television, in the media here in Taiwan, and to a lesser extent in Hong Kong over the past 24 hours. America's spokespeople had to issue a public statement clarifying his remarks. Although, to be fair to America, there really wasn't much to clarify. He was directing his criticisms where it should be directed, which is at the government of China, a failure to sincerely implement one country, two systems, erosion of the one country, two systems model in Hong Kong, concerns about freedom and democracy. Now, America is not a stranger to controversial statements. He has a very direct speaking style. He often gets in trouble for the things he says, both about domestic Taiwan politics as well as about foreign affairs, things he said about other cultures. Earlier this year, he visited Israel and made some remarks about the Holocaust that got a lot of criticism. Again, probably a bit unfair, but that's just his style, and sometimes he needs to fix or clarify his remarks. So we're kind of used to that with America, and that's probably what some of the voters like about him. That's why they elected him twice to be mayor. But be that as it may, in this particular situation, Joshua Wong and Agnes Chow, you got to read what the mayor said. Perhaps you should give him a little bit of slack. He was not criticizing the protesters. He certainly was not criticizing the right of the protesters to be in the streets of Hong Kong, to oppose certain policies of the Hong Kong government. He did not criticize them for that. His criticism was directed at Beijing, the leadership in Beijing. He didn't say Xi Jinping by name in this particular sentence, but that's where the criticism was directed. Again, America doesn't also get criticized here in Taiwan for being too close, for direct speech, but he gets criticized for being too close to China as well. In this situation, it probably was an example, but he's been criticized for saying that we're all one family, China and Taiwan. Sometimes he's criticized for not saying that China is wrong when many people in Taiwan perceive that China has done something that's wrong. This situation is not an example of that. Well, but let's compare America's statements with the statements made by President Tsai and the Democratic Progressive Party, which is the party of President Tsai and also has the majority in the legislative yuan. Their comments about the shooting incident in Hong Kong, very different than America. They talked about the unfortunate bloodshed in the streets of Hong Kong and that they support the protesters. That's been a very consistent position of the government, of President Tsai, of the DPP. We see that on social media over the last few months. In fact, if we go back to when the extradition bill was proposed, the government of President Tsai here in Taiwan was very clear: if this extradition bill is passed into law in Hong Kong, we will not accept the return of the murderer from Hong Kong to Taiwan to stand trial. We want him to stand trial here in Taiwan, but the position of the Taiwan government was always, we want to negotiate a bilateral agreement. We don't support the return of this accused murderer to Taiwan under the proposed extradition bill framework, this domestic law in Hong Kong. Politically, it was very astute for Tsai Ing-wen. It's worked out well. Her poll numbers have been increasing. People in Hong Kong very, very appreciative of the position that she's taken. But as far as the events this week, criticism of the bloodshed. We also saw that many leading personalities of the Democratic Progressive Party, including the party chairman, they went to an event that was held here in Taiwan on Sunday, solidarity event for the protesters in Hong Kong. Similar events were held all over the world. And here in Taiwan, there was an event in Taipei as well as in other cities around Taiwan, such as Kaohsiung and some of the smaller cities. And the protest, or the rally organizers here in Taiwan, they estimated 100,000 people attended. Now, it was a very rainy day on Sunday. I went out to look at the number of people who were there. Probably wasn't 100,000 organizers of events. They tend to overestimate. Media will tend to underestimate, especially if it's unfriendly media. A lot of the media simply repeated what the protest rally organizer said, 100,000. So most media reports said 100,000. There was some media that reported as hundreds of thousands. That was clearly inaccurate, but fairly well attended, even if it was in the tens of thousands on a rainy day. That's not a bad turnout. A lot of politicians from the Democratic Progressive Party were there condemning Beijing, condemning the erosion of one country, two systems. Of course, it helps with presidential politics here in Taiwan as well. Voters seem to like this, and again, that's why the poll numbers have been going up for Tsai Ing-wen in part because of standing up to China and taking the side of the protesters in Hong Kong. There was a very unfortunate incident. Denise Ho, Hong Kong cantopop singer, has been very supportive of the protest movement. She's been outspoken in Hong Kong. She's been in the United States. She spoke in Washington, D.C. at a congressional hearing recently. She was attacked by a pro-Beijing person here in Taiwan who threw red liquid at her. Very unfortunate. Let's hope that the persons who did that will get prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Very dangerous to do that. We support freedom of speech, even for visitors, apparently. So visitors to Taiwan can attend rallies and give public speeches about political events. And the government here made that very clear when they were asked that it's okay for foreigners to come to Taiwan and do that. So we support the right for people to organize, to rally, to give their position on a political issue. We do not support the use of violence or attacking people. So let's hope those people get prosecuted, and the government will probably ensure that they do to the fullest extent of the law. Who was missing from this rally and came in for some criticism was Kuomintang politicians. They were absent. So we have this event in Taiwan, in Taipei, tens of thousands of people there, politicians from the DPP, other minor political parties like the New Power Party, which is pro-independence and also been very supportive of the Hong Kong protesters, talking about the events. Kuomintang is absent. They got a lot of criticism for that. But they did, Kuomintang, to be fair, they did criticize the violence that occurred in Hong Kong on October 1st. But they're lagging behind the president and the DPP in this regard. Again, probably a factor in why Hangguoyu's poll numbers have been falling. But this issue will not go away. We keep getting asked to talk about this. Why is Taiwan so closely linked? And we see once again, with the upcoming release of The Murderer, with the rallies that were held here in Taiwan on this past Sunday, and the immediate response by Joshua Wong and Agnes Chow, probably a bit unfair to America's remarks yesterday and how much media attention it's gotten. It's clear that this issue of the protests and what the protesters are seeking and demanding in Hong Kong and its relationship to Taiwan politics and the Taiwan election will continue. They will continue to be closely linked in the coming months as we get closer to the Taiwan presidential election. I'm Ross Feingold, and you've been watching Taiwan Hashtag on Storm Media.